All right, so today we're going deep on something. I think a lot of people, well, they kind of get it, but they don't really get it, you know?
I know exactly what you mean.
Like, we all know our brains are important, but
Right.
Dr. Tara Swart, neuroscientist, medical doctor, she's got all the credentials.
Oh, yeah.
She really digs into how much your brain is running the show.
Oh, it's way more than we think.
When it comes to, like, everything, our bodies, how we handle stress, relationships, you name it.
And it's not just that it's controlling these things. It's like it's got this crazy power to change and like adapt. Remember that weightlifter experiment?
Oh, yeah, the one where they just visualize.
Yeah. They didn't even touch weights for like 2 weeks. They just like pictured themselves lifting. And get this, their muscle mass went up by 13%.
Seriously? Just from thinking about it. That's wild.
It's totally wild.
Yeah.
It just goes to show you, like, we have no idea what our brains are truly capable of.
It's like we're all walking around with these superpowers we don't even know how to use.
Exactly.
So, starting with stress, I mean, everyone feels it.
All right.
But Dr. Swart, she was working with these high-powered execs, right?
Yeah, especially during that whole financial crisis thing.
And what she saw was basically they were treating their bodies like, I don't know, like a taxi.
Just getting their brains from meeting to meeting.
Yeah, exactly. And they were neglecting everything else. Sleep, food, exercise, the basics.
And it's like, hello, your brain is your most valuable asset. If you want it to perform at its peak, you got to take care of the whole package.
I mean, it makes sense when you think about it. You can't expect a car to run on fumes. Dr. Swart, she even talks about this one bank she was consulting for, and people were literally having heart attacks on the trading floor.
Oh, wow.
Can you imagine? Talk about a stressful environment.
I mean, it's the perfect storm for, like, a full-blown stress meltdown.
Right, and she's like, okay, we can treat the physical symptoms, but if we don't deal with the root cause, the stress, it's just going to keep happening.
Yeah, it's like putting a Band-Aid on a broken leg.
So what's actually going on in our bodies when we're stressed?
Well, it all starts with this hormone called cortisol.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that.
It's like the main stress hormone. And when we're faced with something challenging, whether it's physical or emotional or even just like, a crazy day at work, our adrenal glands pump out this cortisol.
And it goes everywhere.
Everywhere. It floods your system, including your brain.
And our brains are basically like these little cortisol detectors.
They are. They're constantly monitoring the levels, and if they sense a big spike, it's like, whoa, red alert, something's wrong. We got to go into survival mode.
So a little bit of cortisol is okay?
Yeah, totally. It's actually a normal and healthy response to like everyday challenges. Like helps us wake up in the morning, get energized, focus.
So it's not always the bad guy.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
But the problem is when that cortisol stays high for too long, when it's chronic.
That's when the trouble starts.
Yeah, because it's like your body's stuck in this constant state of fight or flight, and that takes a toll. Big time.
What kind of toll?
Well, for starters, it triggers inflammation throughout your body, which is linked to all sorts of problems. It can mess with your vascular system, the area around your heart.
Which explains the heart attacks on the trading floor.
Exactly. In fact, Dr. Swart says that in many of those cases, there weren't any other obvious risk factors like high blood pressure or cholesterol. It was the chronic stress that was the culprit.
It's crazy to think that something that seems so, I don't know, so mental can have such a huge impact on our physical health.
It really is.
Yeah.
But that's the thing about the brain-body connection. It's all intertwined.
And we often hear that stress is subjective, like what stresses one person out might not even faze someone else.
Absolutely. And Dr. Swart agrees with that.
Right.
She defines stress as the point where your perceived demands, whether they're physical, mental, emotional, whatever, exceed your perceived ability to cope.
So it's all about how we perceive things.
Exactly. But here's the thing. Even though our experience of stress can be different, the physiological response, that cortisol surge, is pretty much the same across the board.
So whether I'm freaking out about a presentation or you're, I don't know, about to jump out of a plane, our bodies are both pumping out cortisol.
Yeah, pretty much. And that's why it's so important to recognize the difference between a healthy, adaptive stress response, which is short-lived, and chronic stress, which is like this slow burn that just keeps going and going.
Okay, this is going to sound weird, but can stress be, like, contagious?
It actually can. It's pretty wild.
Really?
Yeah. Think about it like this. You know how women who live or work together often end up syncing their periods?
Yeah, that's a thing.
Well, that happens because of hormones, right? Like
Yeah.
estrogen and progesterone. They get released in sweat, and they can actually subtly influence the hormonal balance of the people around us.
So it's like this invisible chemical communication.
It is. And guess what? Cortisol does the same thing.
No way.
It gets released in our sweat, too, and it can affect the people around us, especially those who are in a more, I guess you could say, subordinate position.
Like, if your boss is super stressed out, it's going to affect you more than it affects them.
Yeah, potentially. Because there's this kind of power dynamic at play. And the person lower down the hierarchy is often more susceptible to the stress signals coming from the person in charge.
So it's not just in my head when I feel drained after being around someone who's super stressed.
Nope, it's a real thing. It's like their cortisol is literally rubbing off on you.
And here's another fun fact about cortisol. It can make you gain belly fat.
Oh yeah, that stubborn belly fat that just won't go away no matter how much you exercise or diet.
Yeah, that's the one.
Well, guess what? It's often a sign of chronic stress.
So it's like a stress pouch.
Kind of. It's basically your body's way of storing energy in case of like a famine or a war or, some kind of major threat.
Which makes sense from an evolutionary perspective, right?
Totally. Back in the day when we were constantly facing danger, having a little extra padding around the middle could mean the difference between life and death.
But these days, it's more likely to mean the difference between fitting into your jeans or not.
Right. And the frustrating thing is, you can't spot reduce fat. So even if you're doing crunches till you're blue in the face, if your cortisol's still high, that belly fat's going to stick around.
So what can we do about it?
Well, the key is to manage your stress and bring those cortisol levels down. And there are actually some pretty simple things you can do.
Like what?
Exercise is huge.
Really?
Huge. Especially aerobic exercise. When you get your heart rate up and you start sweating, you're literally flushing cortisol out of your body.
So it's like a physical detox.
Exactly.
Hmm?
And another great strategy is journaling or talking to someone you trust about how you're feeling. Just getting those thoughts and emotions out of your head can make a big difference.
So it's not good to bottle things up.
Nope. Bottling things up just keeps those stress hormones circulating in your system.
So sweating it out and talking it out.
Do the best things you can do for your stress levels and for your overall health.
Okay, let's shift gears a little bit. Let's talk about connection.
Oh, yeah.
Bonding with other people. It's like this fundamental human need.
It really is. And the science behind it is fascinating.
Dr. Swart, she talks about this amazing thing with mothers and babies.
Oh, yeah, the eye contact thing.
Yeah. Apparently, there's this specific way that mothers and babies look at each other that creates, like, this super strong emotional bond.
It's true. It's like this right eye to left eye connection that sets up this really powerful feedback loop in their brains.
So it's not just any old eye contact.
Nope. It's got to be that specific direction for it to really work its magic.
And bonding isn't just for babies.
No way.
Yep.
It's something we need throughout our lives. And one of the key ingredients is physical touch.
Like hugging.
Like hugging, or even just a handshake or a pat on the back. These little acts of physical contact trigger the release of oxytocin, which is often called the love hormone.
So hugs are basically like little doses of love.
They are. And so is laughter, by the way. And even taking a warm bath.
Seriously, a bath can make me feel more connected to people.
It can. It's all about stimulating that oxytocin release. And it doesn't even have to be all sunshine and roses either.
What do you mean?
Well, Dr. Swart points out that shared emotional experiences, even if they're not necessarily positive, can also bring people closer together.
So like going through a tough time together.
Exactly. It's like this shared vulnerability creates a bond that can be really powerful.
Okay, now for the topic everyone loves to hate, sleep.
I know, right? We all know we need it. But actually getting enough is a whole other story.
Dr. Swart is pretty adamant about getting enough sleep, though. Like, she says most adults need around 8 hours and 15 minutes.
And it's not just about feeling rested. It's crucial for so many things, like your memory, your mood, your ability to handle stress, even your physical health.
She talks about this thing called the glymphatic system.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. It's basically like your brain's overnight cleaning crew.
So while we're sleeping, our brains are doing chores.
They are. And it's super important work. This glymphatic system flushes out all sorts of waste products and toxins that build up in your brain during the day.
Like what kind of toxin?
Well, some of them are linked to neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. Things like tau proteins, amyloid plaques, neurofibrillary tangles, all that fun stuff.
So if we don't get enough sleep, our brains can't clean themselves properly.
Exactly. And that can have some pretty serious consequences down the line.
So it's not just about feeling groggy the next day, it's about protecting our brains in the long term.
Absolutely. And here's a little tip. Dr. Swart recommends sleeping on your side.
Why?
Well, it seems like it might help the lymphatic system work more efficiently.
Huh, interesting.
And, it makes sense when you think about it from an evolutionary perspective. For most of human history, people slept together in groups, often huddled up for warmth and safety.
Yeah, co-sleeping.
Exactly. And that close physical contact would have also boosted oxytocin levels, strengthening those social bonds.
So it's like a sleep cuddle bond trifecta.
It is. And while it's not always practical or desirable to sleep in a giant cuddle puddle these days, Dr. Swart does suggest that consistently sleeping apart from your partner could potentially weaken your bond over time.
So those accidental snuggles in the middle of the night might actually be good for your relationship.
They might be. And speaking of relationships, did you know that something as simple as a morning kiss can actually boost your physiological resilience?
Really, a kiss can make me more resilient.
It can. There's this thing called heart rate variability, which is basically a measure of how adaptable your nervous system is. And it turns out that a morning kiss can actually increase your heart rate variability, making you more resilient to stress and challenges throughout the day.
Wow, I'll have to remember that one.
Pass it on.
Okay, let's talk about intuition. Is it real? Is it just a bunch of hocus pocus? What's the deal?
Well, Dr. Swart has a pretty interesting take on it. She says intuition is basically a form of wisdom and experience that's stored throughout your nervous system, including, get this, your gut.
So our guts are wise.
In a way, yes. They're packed with neurons, just like our brains. And all that neural activity is constantly sending signals back and forth to the brain, influencing our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors.
So it's not just some mystical sixth sense.
Nope. It's actually grounded in real biology. And it all comes down to this principle called Hebbian learning, which is often summed up as neurons that fire together wire together. Meaning that every time we have an experience, whether it's positive or negative, those neurons involved in that experience fire together. And the more they fire together, the stronger the connection between them becomes.
So it's like creating a well-worn path in the brain.
Exactly. And eventually that path becomes so well-worn that the information flows along it effortlessly without us even having to think about it. And that's where intuition comes in.
So it's like our subconscious is picking up on all these cues and patterns that our conscious mind might not even be aware of.
Exactly. It's like this vast storehouse of knowledge and wisdom that we can tap into if we know how.
And the gut plays a big role in this.
A huge role.
Yeah.
It's constantly sending signals to the brain about what's going on in our bodies and in our environment. And those signals can influence our intuition in all sorts of ways.
That explains why we get that gut feeling about things.
Yeah, it's not just some random hunch. It's our gut talking to our brain, giving us its 2 cents.
So we should listen to our guts more often.
I think so. It's all about paying attention to those subtle signals and learning to trust our intuition.
Okay, now for a more serious topic. The mental health crisis.
Yeah, it's a big one.
Dr. Swart believes we're in the midst of a full-blown mental health crisis, and she blames it, at least part, on the pandemic.
Makes sense. I mean, think about all the stress and uncertainty and loss that people have experienced over the past few years.
It's been a lot.
It really has. And even though things are starting to get back to normal, Dr. Swart thinks we haven't fully processed the emotional toll of everything that's happened.
She says we're too focused on the short term and not thinking enough about the long-term consequences.
And she contrasts that with the wisdom of indigenous cultures, like the first Americans, who traditionally considered the impact of their decisions 7 generations into the future.
Wow, 7 generations. That's a long-term perspective.
It really is, and it's something that seems to be missing from our modern way of thinking.
Dr. Swart, she calls for a spiritual revolution.
And by that, she doesn't mean anything religious. She's talking about a shift in our values, a return to practices that genuinely nourish our minds and bodies.
What kind of practices?
Well, for one thing, spending time in nature. There's tons of research showing that being in nature is incredibly beneficial for our mental and physical health. It reduces stress, improves mood, boosts creativity, even strengthens our immune systems.
So we should all be getting outside more.
Absolutely. And another important practice is cultivating a sense of purpose that goes beyond just our own self-interest.
Like volunteering or helping others.
Exactly. Dr. Swart says this desire to contribute to something bigger than ourselves is actually hardwired into our brains.
Like it's part of our evolutionary heritage.
It is. Back in the day when we lived in small tribes, our survival depended on everyone working together for the common good.
And those who didn't contribute were probably kicked out of the tribe.
Probably. So it makes sense that we've evolved to feel good when we're helping others.
And Dr. Swart also talks about neuroaesthetics and neuroarts.
Yes, this is all about the positive impact of engaging in creative activities and surrounding ourselves with beauty.
So things like dancing, music, art, even just spending time in beautiful places.
Exactly. And the reason this is so beneficial is that it signals safety and well-being to the brain.
Like when we see a beautiful sunset or listen to a piece of music that moves us, our brains are like, everything's okay, we can relax.
Exactly. And that relaxation response allows us to thrive.
And she also points out the power of language and association. Like even the word trees can evoke feelings of peace and tranquility in many people because it's associated with positive experiences in nature.
It's amazing how our brains create these links between words and feelings.
But of course, it's not always easy to prioritize these well-being practices in our busy modern world.
It's not. We're constantly bombarded with distractions and demands.
Dr. Swart, she's got some tips for navigating that, though.
Oh yeah, she's got a whole toolbox of strategies.
Yeah.
One of the big ones is being mindful of your screen time.
So putting down the phone, stepping away from the computer.
Exactly. And she also talks about the importance of choosing your online content carefully, like avoiding things like pornography and dating apps.
Because?
Well, there's a growing body of research suggesting that these types of content can actually have negative impacts on our brains and our relationships.
Really?
Yeah, they can actually rewire our brains in ways that make it harder to experience intimacy and connection in real life.
That's scary.
It is. And she also talks about the phenomenon of social contagion.
Which is?
It's basically the idea that behaviors and attitudes can spread through social networks.
So if I hang out with a bunch of negative people, I'm more likely to become negative myself.
Yeah, potentially. And the same goes for positive behaviors and attitudes. So it's really important to be mindful of who you're spending your time with.
Choose your tribe wisely.
Exactly. Now, for the grand finale, let's talk about neuroplasticity.
That's the one everyone's talking about these days.
It's pretty mind-blowing stuff. It's basically the brain's ability to change and adapt throughout our lives.
So we're not stuck with the brains we were born with.
Nope. Our brains are constantly rewiring themselves in response to our experiences.
And this is happening all the time.
All the time. It's most pronounced during childhood and adolescence, but it continues throughout adulthood, even into old age.
So it's never too late to learn new things or change old habits.
Never too late. And the best part is, we can actually actively influence this process.
How?
By challenging our brains. When we learn new things, try new experiences, step outside of our comfort zones, we force our brains to adapt and create new connections.
So it's all about keeping our brains busy.
In a way, yes. And the more we challenge our brains, the more adaptable and resilient they become.
And what are the actual mechanisms behind this neuroplasticity thing?
Well, there are three main ones. The first is myelination, which is basically the process of strengthening the connections between neurons. It's like adding insulation to electrical wires, making the signals travel faster and more efficiently.
So it's like a brain upgrade.
It is. And the second mechanism is synaptic connections. This is where new pathways are formed between neurons, creating new connections and networks.
So it's like building new roads in the brain.
Exactly. And the third mechanism is neurogenesis, which is the actual birth of new neurons.
New brain cells.
New brain cells. And while this happens most readily in children, it can actually continue to happen in adults too, especially in the hippocampus, which is a part of the brain involved in learning and memory.
So we can actually grow new brain cells.
We can. And one of the best ways to do that is through exercise.
So exercise is good for our bodies and our brains.
A double whammy. And certain foods can also help, like blueberries, dark chocolate, and purple sprouting broccoli. And speaking of that weightlifter experiment, it turns out that even just visualizing yourself doing something can actually trigger some of these neuroplasticity changes.
So if I imagine myself speaking fluent French, I might actually get better at it.
You might. It's all about tricking your brain into thinking it's actually doing the thing.
The power of the mind.
And speaking of power, there are some things we can do to create the optimal conditions for neuroplasticity to flourish.
Like what?
Well, sleep is huge.
Again with the sleep.
It's so important. When we sleep, our brains are busy consolidating memories, clearing out toxins, and basically doing all the maintenance work that needs to be done.
So sleep is like a brain spa day.
It is. And exercise, as we've already discussed, is also crucial. And so is a healthy diet, especially one that's rich in antioxidants and omega-3 fatty acids.
So lots of fruits, veggies, nuts, and seeds.
Exactly. And managing stress is also key, because chronic stress can actually inhibit neuroplasticity.
So it's all about creating a brain-friendly environment.
It is. And once we've got those basics covered, we can start to consciously use neuroplasticity to change our habits and improve our lives.
Okay, so how do we do that?
Well, Dr. Swart outlines a three-step process. The first step is raised awareness. This is all about becoming aware of the habit you want to change.
So like, okay, I bite my nails when I'm nervous.
Exactly. The second step is focused attention. This is where you start to pay close attention to the triggers and consequences of the habit. Like, what situations make me bite my nails? How do I feel before, during, and after I do it?
So it's like becoming a habit detective.
It is. And the third step is deliberate practice. This is where you consciously choose a new behavior to replace the old habit and then practice it over and over again.
So instead of biting my nails, I might squeeze a stress ball or take a few deep breaths.
Exactly. And the more you practice the new behavior, the stronger those neural pathways become, and the easier it becomes to do automatically.
So it's like rewiring the brain.
It is. But here's the thing. Willpower alone isn't always enough.
Yeah.
We also need accountability.
Like someone to keep us on track.
Exactly. This could be a friend, a family member, a therapist, a coach, anyone who can support you and hold you accountable for your goals.
And Dr. Swart also talks about the impact of trauma on the brain.
Yes, trauma can have a profound impact on our brains,
Yeah.
especially if it happens early in life.
But even deeply ingrained patterns can be changed.
They can. Dr. Swart says it's like our brains are soft-wired, meaning they're malleable and adaptable.
So even if we've been through some tough stuff, there's still hope for healing and growth.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
And she also talks about generational trauma, which is the idea that trauma can be passed down from one generation to the next.
Like the trauma of slavery or the Holocaust.
Exactly. And this can happen through both psychological and epigenetic mechanisms, meaning that trauma can affect not only our own brains, but also the brains of our children and grandchildren.
Wow, that's heavy.
It is. And it highlights the importance of addressing trauma, both individually and collectively, so that we can break these cycles of suffering.
And she also talks about the impact of maternal stress on babies in the womb.
Yes. A mother's stress during pregnancy can actually affect the development of her baby's brain.
So it's important for pregnant women to take care of their mental health.
Absolutely. And she also emphasizes the importance of processing difficult emotions, like grief and heartbreak.
So not bottling things up.
Exactly. She says it's important to allow ourselves to feel those emotions fully so that we can heal and move on.
Okay, let's end on a more positive note.
Yeah.
Dr. Swart, she's a big fan of ancient wisdom.
She is. She believes there's a lot we can learn from ancient cultures about how to live well.
Like what?
Well, for example, she talks about the benefits of humming and chanting.
Really? Humming?
Yeah. It turns out that humming and chanting can actually have a calming effect on the nervous system and can even boost creativity.
Huh. Who knew?
And she also talks about the power of mindset, specifically how our beliefs about aging can actually influence how we age.
Like if you think you're going to get old and frail, you're more likely to actually become old and frail.
Exactly. And there's a fascinating study where a group of octogenarians were asked to live as if they were in their 60s for a week. They were given clothes from that era. They listened to music from that era. They talked about events from that era. And get this, at the end of the week, they actually showed physical improvements. Seriously. Their posture improved, their grip strength increased, they even walked faster.
So our minds can literally change our bodies.
They can. And Dr. Swart even has a personal anecdote about this. She says she used to need reading glasses, but then she decided to stop accepting that as a fact of aging, and she started doing eye exercises and focusing on seeing clearly, and eventually she didn't need reading glasses anymore.
So she basically willed her vision to improve.
She did. And it just goes to show you that our beliefs about what's possible can have a huge impact on our reality.
And there's another study, this one with young medical students, where they were primed with words associated with old age, like Florida and bingo, and guess what? They started walking slower.
It's crazy, right? Just show you how powerful language can be.
And Dr. Swart talks about the importance of using empowering language, both internally and externally.
Yes. She says instead of saying things like, I can't or I need, we should try to say things like, I choose or I'm treating myself.
So it's all about taking ownership of our choices and our lives.
It is. And finally, let's touch briefly on neurodiversity.
That's a big topic.
It is. It basically refers to the idea that there's a wide range of variation in how human brains function.
So things like dyslexia, ADHD, autism.
Exactly. And Dr. Swart suggests that these variations are not necessarily deficits, but rather different ways of thinking and being that can be valuable.
So it's about embracing diversity, not just tolerating it.
Exactly. And she even points out that many ancient cultures were much more accepting of neurodiversity than we are today.
So maybe we have something to learn from the past about how to create a more inclusive and supportive society.
Maybe we do.
All right, so as we wrap up this deep dive into the amazing world of the brain, what's the one key takeaway you want our listeners to remember?
I think the most important thing is that your brain is not fixed. It's constantly changing and adapting, and you have the power to influence that process.
You're not stuck with the brain you were born with.
Nope. You can literally change your brain by changing your thoughts, your behaviors, your environment.
It's empowering.
It is. And one of the simplest things you can do to start harnessing this power is to spend a few minutes each day visualizing your desired outcomes.
So like picturing yourself achieving your goals, living your best life.
Exactly. And the key is to really feel it, to engage all your senses as if it's already happening.
And Dr. Swart says this practice can actually help shift your brain from a state of fear to a state of trust, which makes it easier to actually make those changes happen.
It's like priming your brain for success.
So it's not just wishful thinking.
Nope. It's a powerful tool for change.
I love it. And we want to thank Dr. Tara Swart for sharing her incredible insights with us today. And for those of you who want to dive even deeper into this fascinating world, be sure to check out her podcast, Reinvent Yourself with Dr. Tara. It's launching on October 4th, but season 1 is already available, so you can binge listen to your heart's content.
She's amazing.
She is. And thank you, dear listeners, for joining us on this journey of discovery. We hope you've learned something new and inspiring about the incredible power of your own brain.
And remember,
Yeah.
you are capable of amazing things.
Absolutely. So go out there and change your brain, change your life, and change the world.
Yes.
All right, that's a wrap.